Welcome back to Chaos and Caffeine, the podcast where we embrace the beautiful messiness of ADHD parenting, fueled by strong coffee and even stronger community. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest, who embodies both professional expertise and personal passion, Ellie Richter. Ellie is a certified and licensed bilingual speech-language pathologist based in Missouri. With nearly 15 years of experience, she has dedicated her career to supporting children's communication development in both English and Spanish across various settings, including elementary schools, early childhood centers, home health, private clinics, nonprofit clinics, and virtual platforms. But Ellie isn't just a seasoned SLP. She's also a mom to a spirited 5-year-old son. Her dual roles as a clinician and parent fuel her advocacy for quality early care and education. As a parent fellow with Kids Win Missouri, Ellie uses her voice to champion policies that support children and families, emphasizing the importance of accessible, affordable, and high-quality early education. In addition to her clinical and advocacy work, Ellie is a trailblazer in the teletherapy space. She offers virtual school contracting in multiple states and is the creator of the Essential Teletherapist course designed to help fellow SLPs with the tools and confidence they need to thrive in virtual therapy settings. Her podcast of the same name further extends her mission to build a supportive community for remote SLPs. Ellie's multifaceted expertise makes her an invaluable resource for ADHD parents seeking to navigate the complexities of communication development. So, grab your favorite mug, settle in, and join us as we delve into a conversation filled with insights, empathy, and practical strategies to support our children's unique journeys. Ellie, welcome to Chaos and Caffeine.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. So I hate to always start here, but I have to because so many of us were not diagnosed until our kiddos were. So I'm curious how that journey was for you.
Yeah. Well, it started during the 2020 years, during our pandemic era. Um, I was forced to work from home with a kid who was freshly turned 2,
Hmm.
and we were out of our routine, and I was learning how to be a parent and learning how to work from home. And we had all of our routine structures kind of stripped away from us for about a good solid 3 years.
Oh, wow.
So for us, I knew something was a little bit different when I was interacting with my son. And so I thought, I think there might be something going on here. I don't know if it's sensory, I don't know if it's attention, but things seem to be a little bit harder than I think they're supposed to be. Um, and when that was kind of coming together, I'm a speech therapist, so I work with a lot of occupational therapists, speech therapists, and I had one coworker kind of explain that, I think your son has some sensory needs, which was a very polite way of saying, I think your child has ADHD. And I had another coworker like kind of mention some of my behaviors and mannerisms at work were congruent with ADHD. And I was like, oh, I think people are being very kind to me right now. And so as soon as my son turned 3, I had him tested through the school district. And at the same time, I self-identified to my provider and I lit up like a Christmas tree on the screener. I was like, okay. So I got confirmed through my general practitioner that I have ADHD, which is what I assumed. And all testing came back normal for my son, which is what I was hoping because I knew it was probably only attention. So I wasn't looking at language disorder or anything like that. So having ruled that out, I knew that when he went to kindergarten and was 6, I could take this information to the pediatrician and say, hey, I've ruled out everything else. This is what we're seeing at home and in the classroom. and we need support. Um, so that's kind of how I was diagnosed at the same time as my son. Um, and we've kind of bebopped around between different therapies and treatment measures. So that's kind of where we are now.
And how do you feel being diagnosed later in life? Was it, oh, I always knew that, or was it shocking?
I always knew that there were parts of me that felt like they were too much for other people.
Hmm.
And I was very self-conscious about that. And I always picked up on people's energy about how my energy was. And I was a talker and I was a daydreamer and a big dreamer. And it always seemed like a lot for maybe other people who were maybe not neurodivergent. And I think being diagnosed later in life, I feel validated that there was nothing wrong with me, but I do feel like I'm learning how to appreciate those parts of me when I was a child.
Hmm.
So relearning how I think and feel about those moments from my childhood. So how do I feel now as an adult? I cried during my telehealth appointment with my provider when they're like, yeah, you absolutely have it. All you are combined, you have all of it. Inattentive, hyperactive. I was like, okay. And now that I've kind of come to terms in a positive way, I wasn't upset, I was almost relieved. But
Hmm.
now that I've come to terms with it, I know how to advocate for myself better because I know my brain works differently and I can be mindful of that and I can ask people to hold me accountable to things and ask for feedback. And I'm still very defensive about that. So I want the help, but I'm going to be very, very defensive about it. But yeah, I think that's where I am right now.
I think that's good though. Awareness and advocacy is good. So being aware that you are going to come in hot is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I have not heard many parents say that their child was 2 or 3 and that they were like, oh yeah, for sure, this is ADHD. I have that particular personal experience, but I'm wondering what symptoms showed up for you, for the listeners that are believing their toddlers might have ADHD.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I, as a speech therapist, I felt like I was hitting the boxes pretty well on speech and language development. And I knew that when we were interacting together, my son and I, because just, as background, this was 2020. So it was me, my husband, and my son, and we were pretty much together all the time. If we weren't, my husband went to work, so um, he worked out of the home during the pandemic era, and my son was home from daycare for a while, but then he did continue going to daycare throughout that time. So he was around other children. My husband did leave the home, but for me, I was always with my husband, my son, and myself.
Yeah.
So I knew from my experience working with children with speech and language delays that his attention to tasks that were not intrinsically his own idea were very fleeting. And while he could follow directions, if he wasn't motivated to do that, he wasn't going to do it. And I was like, okay. So I had to make everything a game. My entire life was a game at this point because I had to make everything a game so that we could accomplish the few things that we truly needed to get done.
Yeah.
We were very accommodating, but like when you function your entire household as accommodations to get some basic tasks done with your child, it is exhausting.
Hmm.
And parenting is exhausting at baseline. And this was beyond anything I was prepared for. And I wouldn't say it was like stressful in an upset, uncomfortable way, but you start to notice like, hey, we have to behave a certain way around meal times, around, multi-step directions. And it's different from not being able to follow directions to he needs a reminder for everything because he doesn't have the executive functioning developing at the rate that you would typically expect.
Yeah.
And that was new for me. And I remember when we were finally able to leave the house together to go places like to the movie theater, I'd be holding his hand and he'd be pulling away from me, not trying to get away, but for sensory input and just swinging off of my arm.
Yeah.
And I would just be in public, just exhausted. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't see any other parent having this same experience.
Mm.
And that was like, okay, things are a little different for us.
Yeah.
So that's how I knew something was a little unexpected for our family.
Yeah. I had my son, my ex was military, so we were away from family and friends. And I think for a really long time, they thought I was just being an over exaggerative new mom. And then we moved home and they were like, oh, this is
Yeah.
real. You weren't over exaggerating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are definitely times where I have to explain, like, if there's going to be like an extended family get together at a park somewhere, I can't just drop my son off with my dad to go to this family event because my son could get distracted by something in a very normal way, like a child would.
Yeah.
It's the coming back part and remembering to come back and not go too far and not share that distraction and excitement for that with a stranger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he knows all of those things. He knows not to leave the property. He knows not to go places with strangers. He knows not to talk to strangers. He knows the rules. But when it comes to the executive functioning and inhibition, it's not developed the way it typically would be for a child his age yet.
Yeah.
So we have to have different strategies in place as a family to keep him safe. And trying to explain that to people who don't have to go through that, I try to work through like if there's any embarrassment or shame with myself for that, but also I have to advocate for him because he can't always advocate for himself. So it's just, it's a lot.
It
It's a
is.
lot of mental work that goes into that.
Yeah. The sigh that you had back there when you were describing all of that resonated with me very deeply.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you are both an SLP and an ADHD parent. I'm wondering how they shape each other, how your career has shaped your parenting. I know you said you were feeling like you were hitting all the boxes there, but I'm also wondering how the parenting is shaping your work.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll start with being an SLP. I felt like I had the background of child development, relational attachment stuff, um, teaching the basic concepts, teaching acceptance of all, inclusivity, all these things. I'm like, we're gonna kill it. We're doing good. I have a great husband who picks up on what I'm trying to do and will model and imitate that. And we work really well together with that. Um, when it comes to the ADHD part of it, I have always worked with younger children. My career has since changed a little bit, and I'm learning a lot more about executive functioning development, which is so important with our kids with ADHD, which is essentially an executive functioning disorder, right? So I'm learning so much more about how to support that and help develop those skills that I didn't learn that in graduate school. I didn't learn that as a parent. I didn't learn it as a human. So I'm trying to harness what I can from my field in that area so that I can be a better parent, with better strategies to not so much be the executive functioning for my child, but to help them develop it themselves. Um, so that's kind of where my worlds intersect. I will say, my poor husband, The summer I was diagnosed with ADHD, I ended up quitting my job and decided to work for myself. And I'm sure he was like, I feel bamboozled or something. I was like, oh, I have a really difficult time regulating myself, but I think I'm going to quit my job and work for myself. And I will say, being an entrepreneur with ADHD, I am able to chase that dopamine of creativity every day. And it has really improved my self-esteem. It has improved my range of creativity that I can work with. And I feel like I'm a better SLP because of it. I feel like I can do so much better work with kind of betting on myself. I think Beyonce actually said, I will always bet on myself because I trust myself to do the job that I want done. Something along those lines. So I kind of feel like that. I'm far from Beyonce, but I feel like that really resonated with me. I can bet on myself because I know I'm going to work myself the way I need to.
Thank you for that reframe because I have been working for myself with the podcast for about 60 days now. And some days I feel like I'm flailing because I don't have the structure. So I've been
Yeah.
working on a routine so I know what to do each day.
Mhm.
But I think I'm going to reframe it like you just put it to me. I am really betting on myself.
Mhm.
And also, I can expand my creativity in ways I couldn't before. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the way I work is different than the way other people work. Um, my brain works differently, and I have to focus on what is going to help me sustain my attention at that time. And so I may be really good at one particular task at like 4:15 p.m., right? But I may need to take a break and revisit it at 9 p.m.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not to say I don't have boundaries, because I definitely have boundaries, and I've had to be very more mindful and cognizant of boundaries because I do want to do so much creatively. I've had to learn how to outsource some things so that I can focus on what my strengths are. I don't know if I would have done that if I hadn't been diagnosed. And I don't know if I would have done that if I wouldn't have quit my like 9 to 5 job.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
So many parents worry about their child's speech, whether it's delayed or trouble with communication or the nonstop talking. What
Mhm.
are some common speech and language challenges in our kiddos?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like when you say you've met one person with one, there's a saying that's like, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. There are similarities sometimes between different people, but the same kind of goes for ADHD. There are similarities, but it's such a wide variety of things that can manifest in different people, because every brain works differently. When it comes to at least my child with ADHD, he is someone who has most of the hyperactive check marks, but not all of them. And then most of the inattentive check marks, but not all of them. So when it comes to communication, a lot of times, and I do this myself, a lot of times we will just start talking about something, but it doesn't have an introduction, and we just assume the other person is going to pick up on what we're talking about. So, I don't know if that resonates with anyone who's listening, but often we will just start a sentence and we'll start talking, and the other person is expected to know what's going on.
For
And
sure.
I have very good friends and very good family that understands that. Um, and I'm very lucky. I remember when I was in grade school, my mom actually took me to Mizzou, the University of Missouri in Columbia, to get a speech and language evaluation because I would just start talking and assume the other person knew what I was talking about. And she's like, "That's not normal. You need
Mm,
to open up, get their attention, and then communicate." And I know now that was not. a speech and language disorder per se. That was just my brain didn't realize
Mm.
what the other person's perspective was and
Yeah.
that planning for communication. So definitely speech and language delays can co-occur with ADHD. Absolutely. I do think it's really important, though, to tease out whether or not there's a true speech and language disorder or delay versus, um, an executive functioning deficit.
Yeah.
The treatment is so different. Both can be completed, both can be treated by a speech language pathologist. Absolutely. I do think that education in the realm of executive functioning is subpar, at least in
Mm.
my own experience. When I went to school, we never talked about that. So there are programs now, and there are SLPs who specialize in this and are training SLPs, and we can take courses to learn more about it, which is what I'm trying to do. But I think it's really important if you do need support in that area to find someone who has experience with it and feels confident in it.
Yeah.
So,
Motherhood is beautiful chaos, especially when you're parenting neurodivergent kiddos. Between the meltdowns, therapy appointments, and endless to-do lists, finding a moment of calm feels impossible. Enter Apollo Neuro, the wearable that doesn't just track your stress, but actively helps you manage it. Designed by neuroscientists, it delivers gentle vibrations that signal safety to your nervous system, helping you feel calmer, more focused, and better rested. You guys know that I've been working with a therapist for about 5 years now to regulate my nervous system with not a lot of success. So I'm giving this a shot, and I think that you should too. Here are a couple of their raving 5-star reviews that are all over the internet. It's like wearing a purring cat on my wrist, soothing and grounding. Another one says, I feel more relaxed and productive throughout the day. With Apollo, you can schedule vibes throughout your day like energy and wake up in the morning or sleep and renew at night, making self-care seamless amidst the chaos. Try Apollo Neuro risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee with the link in the show notes, because every mom deserves a moment of calm. I actually believe it was the SLP in my son's 504 meeting, and she was very kind, and she said, it's really fascinating how his brain works, because they'll be talking about, say, cars, and then his brain goes spinning, and all of a sudden he's coming back with a story about a race car driver, and people are like, what? So I'm like, oh yeah, that's us for sure. And it's really funny, in that same meeting, my son's principal, who is amazing, she said that for all her life, she has tallied marks to let her know how many times she's interrupted someone. And then once she gets to a certain mark, she's like, okay, let's tone it down. But I was like, man, it's crazy how our brains really do work very differently.
yes,
Yeah.
that tally mark thing is fascinating because I also feel like I do that. I'm
Mm.
very self-conscious about, am I interrupting? Am I speaking too much? Have I given the other person enough opportunity to speak and say what they need to say? Um, am I making the conversation about myself?
Mm.
Oftentimes in ADHD, we compare stories,
Yeah.
and oftentimes people with neurodivergent brains will share a story that is similar to the other person's story because we want to say, hey, we hear you, we understand, and this reminds me of something else, so we can relate. And two neurodivergent brains can appreciate that. Neurotypical and neurodivergent, that behavior can actually be seen as selfish
Yeah.
and taking over the conversation and making it about yourself, where
Yeah.
it's not coming from that place, but that is how it's perceived.
Mm.
So while we don't have to change ourselves, we do need to be mindful of that, to maintain a relationship.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
if you want to maintain that friendship, you have to be kind of mindful of it and make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page. But
Mm. So, along those same lines, our kiddos are kind of known for interrupting or talking a mile a minute.
mhm.
Or I find myself struggling to find the right words under pressure. So, how does ADHD impact communication skills, and what can we as parents do to help?
Oh man, that's a great question. I don't know if I've ever thought of it that explicitly. Can you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, so ADHD kiddos are not always, but sometimes known for interrupting or talking a mile a minute, which I'm also guilty of, and then also struggling to find the right words under pressure, which I also often do. So, how
Mhm.
can we as parents impact and help their communication skills when they're struggling with that?
Yeah. So I'll say right off the bat, one of the things I talk about with my son is how his brain works differently from other people's brains. So I want him to know that so he can be aware that your brain is not wrong and it's not bad, but your brain does XYZ. And because it does XYZ, we have to put plans in place for what to do to help your brain to function the best way it can in different situations.
Yeah,
And I feel like that's really important for him to know so he can advocate for himself and take ownership of the strategies that he needs so
mm,
that he can advocate for himself as he gets older.
yeah,
Um, just as an aside, because what's the conversation without a backstory here?
please.
I feel like that's also really important for him to know because there are other kids in his class whose brains work differently. And so it's important for him to know that there are kids in his class who have different accommodations and strategies that they use because their brains work differently. They may have a parent in the classroom, they may go out to see a different professional. And I want him to know that it's okay that his brain works differently and it's okay that their brain works differently. But because everyone's brain works differently, the behaviors and communication is going to manifest differently in the classroom.
Yeah,
And it's okay. You don't have to become upset if someone says something a certain way. You're only in charge of regulating yourself. So, like, everybody's different. Everybody has different things, including yourself. Like,
yeah,
you are not the perfect child in the classroom. Like, let's start there.
yeah.
No one is perfect. So, we talk a lot about, I don't know if I've ever said, hey, you have ADHD, but hey, going to occupational therapy so that you can learn how to regulate your body in space. We're going to go to speech so you can learn how to plan your communication. Um, we do a lot of that, and we do a lot of explicit teaching with reflexive questioning.
Mm,
So that is one thing. There's two SLPs that I adore, Tara Sumter and Sarah Ward. They're two really great SLPs that have resources available for parents and SLPs to help teach executive functioning skills to kids and people who need it.
very
So,
cool.
yeah, one of the things that Sarah Ward has is she has a clock. So you can, I'm going to not do this justice, but you can write on this clock how much time you're going to spend on particular tasks in that hour so that you can have a visual representation of how long you need to be spending on each task to help keep you on task.
Yeah.
Um, and then Tara Sumter has really helpful packets on all the different strands of your brain that work together to formulate executive functioning skills. And she also has a packet on how to incorporate reflexive questioning at home. So rather than telling your child to do step one, step two, step three, it's like wondering, hey, you've completed this task. I wonder what happens after this. What do you
Mm,
need to do in order to complete XYZ? So you're getting them to actually think for themselves what they need to do.
yeah.
So,
Think that part is really important. I had Dr. Bauer on a few episodes back, and she said something like, pills don't teach skills. So, a lot of parents are against medical treatment
mhm.
for ADHD. I am not. My son is actually on medication, but she said either way, they're not going to want to be on medication possibly forever. So, while you have that window, teach them the skills that they're going to need for whenever they don't have that backup. And I was like, man, that is so good. That is so
Yes.
powerful.
I like to explain medication as like glasses. You can't learn to read unless you can see the words. You can't learn to attend unless you have, well, this is my own philosophy. So I want to be really clear that this is how I'm operating in my family is we have chosen to medicate my son so that he can attend to learning.
Yeah.
At the same time, he has gone to speech therapy, occupational therapy, and play therapy. So we're kind of coming at it from a therapeutic side as well as a medicated side so that we
Yeah.
can hit every avenue. And it's worked wonderful for us. I know it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, you have to teach the coping skills so that they can become independent and successful because that's the ultimate goal is you want them to be happy, successful, and independent. And we know research has shown that these kids need early intervention in whatever methodology you're choosing um, to incorporate, and that will help them feel less anxiety, less depression, and be more successful. So,
Agreed. It was a choice for us. Basically, his teacher said that he knows the material. He just cannot sit down long enough to get it on paper. So if he can't get it out of his head and onto paper, he is not going to progress. That makes sense. So
yep.
happy to report for any parents out there questioning that decision or it's weighing on you that
Hmm.
he has done a complete 180, not only academically, but behaviorally and socially. And I could not be more proud of his effort and his work right now. So,
Yeah, we also saw a huge benefit when it came to, and we waited until he was 6, but we've also been very lucky to have an incredible elementary school that he attends. So our son does have a 504. That was, I will say, that was having a 504 so that my son could have accommodations through his academic career was the main reason I started testing so early and having all my ducks in a row so that by the time he hit kindergarten, October 16th, I went in there for our parent teacher conference with like the Vineland, um, the it's like the Vineland survey. And I was like, "Are you seeing any of these in the classroom?" And she was like, "Absolutely." And I was like, "Perfect. I want you to check this, sign it. I'm going to send it to the pediatrician." And that was it was important for me that the people he was working with throughout his academic career would know that he's a bright student, he works really hard, and you're going to need to give him the instructions twice with a
yeah,
visual.
no,
Like,
for sure.
this is what he needs in order to access the curriculum.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah. I believe that the 504 paired with the medication has been the turnaround that we desperately needed, and I
Hmm.
advocate for that so well.
I agree.
Yeah,
I use there's like an attitude website, and they have a little packet there for families. Um, to help them read. You can read through different accommodations that schools can offer for ADHD throughout different grade levels. And I keep that with me. I came prepared to the first meeting. And I was like, oh, the school knows what they're doing. So I didn't need to like flip through it and be like, hey, we need to kind of consider this because they were either already doing it or they suggested it to me. So I was like, fantastic. We're
yeah,
in a great place. But
yeah,
for other families who maybe, you're in a school district that maybe isn't as familiar with accommodations, I do like the Attitude website.
yeah. Thank you for that resource. I can definitely put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So I could literally talk to ADHD parents all day. I've made
Yeah.
it my full-time job, but I do not want to be disrespectful of your time. I want to know, when would a parent recognize that it's time to come and see you and SLP?
Yeah. Anytime. As far as speech goes, let me rephrase that here. When I say speech, I mean anything that encompasses speech and language. Anytime you're struggling as a parent with your child in the realm of communication, or, and to be clear, communication is also being able to answer and understand questions, follow directions. If anything seems off and you're not quite sure, speech therapy can be a great starting point to get a perspective on, hey, Do they have difficulty with their articulation sounds, or is it language, or is it planning what's going on in their brain?
Hmm.
I think a lot of people forget there's a lot of neuroscience that goes into communication, and SLPs can help with that. Not every SLP is trained adequately for executive functioning skills. So it is really important to ask, hey, what is your niche? What is your specialty? I'm looking for someone who can help with executive functioning. And oftentimes, if it's not that SLP's area of interest, they know someone who that is, and they can help and they can refer. But anytime you are wondering or struggling, that usually tells me it's been going on for a while and, you know, you should jump on it.
Yeah. And I know the process may be different state by state, but what would that process look like if you're saying, hey, we have struggle, following directions or communicating? What would be my next steps?
Yeah. So if you're a child under 5, I always recommend going to parents as teachers. That is not therapy, but it's a parent educator who comes into your home, can see the child in their natural environment and give you feedback. And I think that's a really important first step is getting outside perspective from someone who sees a lot of children. They are also usually the gatekeepers of a ton of different resources. Oftentimes, parents as teachers is free. So I always recommend parents as teachers for those kids birth to 5. If you're under 3, there's usually a state early intervention program. In Missouri, it's Missouri First Steps. Um, but every state has a little different, it's like early find program. Birth to 3, you usually have to be delayed in 2 different areas. Um, so it is a little bit more challenging to qualify sometimes. If you don't qualify for that early intervention program, you can always find an SLP through a private practice or a university clinic. Those are great places to go. If you're worried about funding and insurance doesn't cover it, because oftentimes insurance doesn't cover speech therapy through every insurance plan, there are grant programs that you can apply to. And if you just Google speech therapy grants, there are a lot that will pop up and you can apply and get like $1,000 or something that could help you cover at least a couple sessions to get going.
Very nice.
So that is one thing I didn't even know about until this year. Um, and then if you are over 5, well, let me rephrase that. If you are 3 or older, you can usually get tested through the local school district. Maybe not specifically for ADHD, but for communication, sensory stuff. Sensory can often go hand in hand with ADHD. So you're looking, is there a language delay? Is there a sensory disorder? You can at least figure out some things that may or may not be going on, rule something out, identify something else, and get that addressed early on because that early identification and early therapy is so important to successful development trajectory.
Agreed. And for our listeners who are like, she's the one, how can I work with Ellie? She knows my neurodivergent needs and speech needs. How can they work with you?
Yeah, well, you can find me on Instagram. I am the Essential Teletherapist on Instagram, and I work virtually. I'm happy to do some parent coaching, but I would probably refer them to someone in their area who could work more directly with them and have like hands-on with their family.
Got you.
Um, but I love talking through problems and problem solving. So my DMs are always open on Instagram, and I'm happy to point people in a better direction if they need it.
So, Ellie, this is such a basic outro question, but every time I ask it, I feel like it's exactly what I needed to hear in this moment. So, I would like to know any advice you have for ADHD parents struggling at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Um, what a gift it is to have a kid with ADHD because they are just the best.
Yes, they are. That was perfect. Thank you so much for your time, Ellie. I'll be sure to link everything in the show notes so people can come and soak up all of your wisdom.
Yeah, this was such a joy. Thank you for having me.
And that, dear listeners, is a wrap on this jam-packed, brain-expanding convo with the incredible Ellie Richter. Advocate, teletherapy queen, and real life mom in the trenches are right alongside us. Whether your kid is saying too much, not enough, or just saying it at the top of their lungs in a crowded Target, Ellie reminded us today that communication isn't just about speech, it's about connection. And guess what? You don't have to be a speech language pathologist to support your child. You just have to be willing to show up, stay curious, and advocate like hell. If this episode lit a fire under your parenting booty, or gave you one of those, oh my God, that's my kid moments, please share it with a fellow ADHD parent who's riding the same chaotic roller coaster. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review because caffeine and validation keeps this mama going. You can find Ellie and her work at theessentialteletherapist.com or check it out in the show notes. Go check out her podcast and resources, especially if you've ever wondered, is it just a speech delay or something more? Until next time, keep your coffee strong and your patients stronger. You're doing better than you think. Bye.